Ever find yourself staring at those amazing cornsnake morphs and wondering just how they get those colors and patterns?
Yeah, it's like they come in every color and pattern imaginable,
Well, today we're going deep into the science of cornsnake pigmentation.
unraveling the mysteries behind those vibrant scales.
We'll be looking at some fascinating research, specifically a paper called Neural Crest Migration in Cornsnakes by Brian Lobsher.
It's a great deep dive into the cellular mechanisms that create those patterns.
Get ready because we're going to uncover how cells travel to paint those patterns, what genes are pulling the strings, and even how the environment can play a role.
It's like a cellular symphony creating those beautiful designs.
I love that a cellular symphony. So let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
What's actually creating those colors? I always thought it had something to do with the scales themselves.
Well, the scales provide the canvas, but the real artists are these specialized cells called chromatophores.
Chromatophores.
Yeah, they're the pigment cells that give corn snakes their color, and they're derived from an even more amazing group of cells called neural crest cells.
Neural crest cells. Okay, that sounds familiar.
You've probably heard of stem cells, right? Neural crest cells are kind of like stem cells,
Yeah.
but with a very specific mission. In vertebrates, they give rise to a bunch of different cell types, including those pigment cells we were talking about.
So it's these neural crest cells that are ultimately responsible for all those incredible color variations we see in corn snakes.
Exactly. But it's not as simple as them just showing up and deciding what color to be. These cells actually migrate during embryonic development, traveling to specific locations and following specific pathways.
So it's like a cellular road trip.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this migration is key to understanding how those patterns emerge. The paper talks about two main paths. They take the dorsolateral pathway and the ventromedial pathway.
Okay, so two different routes. What's the difference?
Well, the dorsolateral pathway is like the scenic route for pigment cells. It's where they travel between the layers of skin depositing pigments as they go, kind of like painting those intricate patterns we see.
Ah, so that's how those bands and stripes are formed. What about the other pathway, ventromedial? Is that involved in color too?
The ventromedial pathway is a bit different. It's more about building the nervous system. Those neural crest cells are multi-talented. They can become pigment cells, or they can contribute to the nervous system depending on which path they take.
Hold on, so the same cells that create those beautiful colors are also helping to build the nervous system.
Isn't that wild? It shows just how versatile these cells are and how important they are for development. Imagine a world without a nervous system. It's more than just about color. It's about laying the foundation for essential bodily functions.
Okay, that makes sense. So these neural crest cells have got their destination, whether it's to create pigment or build the nervous system. But how do they know where to go?
That's where those molecular signaling pathways come in.
Signaling pathways.
Yeah, think of them like a GPS system guiding those migrating cells every step of the way. They tell them where to go, when to stop, and even what type of cell to become. It's a complex system with lots of different signals involved.
I've heard of things like want signaling and BMP signaling, but it all sounds a bit like alphabet soup to me. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So one signaling, for example, is really important for pigment production.
Yeah.
It activates certain genes that are involved in making those pigments, ensuring that there's enough pigment produced at the right time.
So want signaling is like the factory manager making sure there's enough pigment to go around.
Exactly. Then you have BMP signaling, which is all about decision-making. It helps those neural crest cells decide their fate. Will they become a pigment cell or a nerve cell? It's like a fork in the road determining the entire destiny of the cell.
Wow, so this one signal has a huge impact on the whole process. That's pretty amazing.
It is. And there are other signals too, like FGF signaling, which helps guide the cells to their proper locations, and notch signaling, which prevents them from differentiating too early, ensuring those patterns have time to develop.
It's like a perfectly timed relay race with each signal passing the baton to the next, guiding those cells every step of the way.
And it's all orchestrated by the genes.
Ah, so that's where the genes come in.
Exactly. While these signaling pathways act as the guides, it's the genes that provide the blueprint for the whole process. And those blueprints can have variations or mutations leading to different outcomes in the final product.
So the different colors and patterns we see in cornsnake morphs are actually the result of genetic variations. It's like nature is constantly tinkering with the recipe.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And we can actually trace those variations back to specific genes. For example, one of the key genes involved in pigmentation is the melanocortin-1 receptor gene, or MC1R for short.
Okay, MC1R, what does that one do?
This gene plays a big role in melanin production, which is the pigment responsible for those black and brown colors. We see mutations in this gene all the time in corn snakes. Sometimes these mutations cause a reduction in black pigment, leading to those lighter, more muted colors.
So when we see a corn snake with reduced black pigment like a hypomelanistic morph, we're actually seeing the effects of a change in that MC1R gene.
Exactly. And there are other genes too, like the oculocutaneous albinism second gene or OCA2 mutations in this gene can disrupt melanin production entirely, resulting in albinism. Those corn snakes completely lack black pigment, giving them that striking orange or yellow coloration.
Wow, so it's like someone flipped a switch and turned off the black pigment. That's incredible. What about that lavender morph? That purple-gray color is so unique. What causes that?
The lavender morph. That one's caused by variations in the SLC2A9 gene. It affects how melanin is processed within the cells, giving it that unique lavender hue.
It's amazing how these subtle changes at the genetic level can create such a diverse palette of colors and patterns.
It really highlights the power of genetics in shaping biodiversity. But it's not just genes that are calling the shots here.
Oh, right. We can't forget about the environment.
Exactly. The environment can definitely influence the final outcome. It's like having the blueprint and the construction crew, but the weather can still affect how the building turns out.
So even if two corn snakes have the same genes, they might end up looking different depending on where they grew up.
You got it. For example, the temperature during a corn snake's embryonic development can actually affect pigment differentiation, leading to variations in color saturation and pattern.
So a clutch of eggs from the same parents could end up looking slightly different depending on the temperature of the nest. That's fascinating.
It is, and it shows how development genetics and the environment are all interconnected. It's not just nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture working together.
That's a great point. What about epigenetics? I've heard that term thrown around a lot lately. Does that play a role here too?
Absolutely. Epigenetics adds yet another layer of complexity to the story. It refers to changes in gene activity that don't actually involve changes to the DNA sequence itself. Think of it like this. You have the same blueprint, but you're using different construction materials or techniques.
So two corn snakes could have the same genes, but their genes might be expressed differently, leading to subtle variations in appearance.
Precisely. Epigenetic modifications can fine-tune the expression of genes involved in pigmentation. It's like adjusting the volume knob on certain genes, leading to those subtle differences we sometimes see, even when the underlying genetic code is the same.
This is blowing my mind. So we've got these neural crest cells migrating and creating these patterns, and it's all guided by signaling pathways influenced by genes and the environment. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance of biology. But I have to ask, there's got to be more to it than just aesthetics, right? Why are these patterns so important from an evolutionary perspective?
You're right, it's not just about looking cool. These patterns actually play a vital role in a corn snake's survival.
Oh yeah, like those corn snakes that mimic venomous snakes to scare off predators. That's incredible.
That's called the Tejan mimicry, and it's a great example of how these patterns can be beneficial for survival. Some corn snakes have evolved to look like venomous species like the coral snake or the copperhead, fooling predators into thinking they're dangerous.
It's like they're wearing a biological disguise.
Yeah.
Genius.
It is a pretty clever strategy. But it's not just about mimicry. Pigment variation also helps corn snakes adapt to different environments.
So you're saying that different environments favor different types of patterns?
Absolutely. Imagine a corn snake living in a dense forest. A bright, high-contrast pattern would make it stand out like a sore thumb. But a darker, more mottled pattern would help it blend in with the shadows and the leaves, making it harder for predators to spot.
That makes sense. So it's all about camouflage and blending in with the surroundings.
Exactly. And over time, natural selection has favored those corn snakes with patterns that best suit their environment. It's like nature is constantly running experiments, seeing which patterns work best in which habitats.
So it's not just about looking cool, it's about survival of the fittest. This whole conversation has really changed how I see corn snakes. It's not just about their beauty anymore. It's about understanding the amazing biological processes that have shaped their evolution.
I'm glad to hear it. And it's a great reminder that there's always more to learn and discover about the natural world. We often take these amazing creatures for granted, but there's a whole universe of complexity hidden beneath the surface, just waiting to be explored.
Well, I'm definitely ready to explore more.
Great. Because next we're going to delve even deeper into the world of corn snake genetics and unravel the mysteries behind those incredible morphs.
I can't wait. This is going to be good.
So we've been exploring those amazing neural crest cells, those tiny travelers that create all those stunning colors and patterns in corn snakes.
It's amazing how much is going on beneath the surface. It's like a hidden world of cellular activity shaping these beautiful creatures.
Yeah, it really is. And we've been talking about how those patterns aren't just for show. right? They actually play a crucial role in a corn snake's survival.
Right, like those masters of disguise, the ones that have evolved to look like venomous snakes. It's called Batesian mimicry, right?
Exactly. It's a brilliant strategy that some corn snakes use to deter predators. They've evolved to mimic the coloration of venomous species, like the coral snake or the copperhead.
So they're basically wearing a warning sign that says, "Don't mess with me, I'm dangerous," even though they're perfectly harmless.
Exactly. It's a pretty effective way to avoid becoming someone's lunch. But beyond mimicry, corn snake patterns are also linked to their ability to thrive in different environments.
That makes sense. I can't imagine a bright red corn snake blending in very well in a dark forest.
You're right. A bold, high-contrast pattern might stand out in a dense forest, making it an easy target for predators. But that same pattern could be perfect camouflage in a rocky, sun-drenched landscape, where those colors would help it blend in with the surroundings.
So it's like nature is playing a game of hide and seek, favoring those corn snakes with patterns that best suit their environment.
Exactly. The environment acts as a selective pressure shaping the evolution of those patterns over time.
I'm curious about those neural crest cells again. We talked about how they create those patterns, but do they play a role in this environmental adaptation as well?
That's a great question. Remember those signaling pathways we discussed earlier? The ones that guide the migration and differentiation of neural crest cells. Well, those pathways aren't just influenced by genes, they can also respond to environmental cues.
Wait, so a corn snake developing in a shady forest might receive different signals than one developing in a bright open grassland.
Exactly. Those signals could subtly influence the migration and differentiation of those neural crest cells, potentially leading to variations in pigment depositions and ultimately different patterns.
It's like the environment is whispering instructions to those migrating cells, guiding them to create the perfect camouflage for their future home.
It's a beautiful example of how development, genetics, and the environment are all interconnected, shaping biodiversity at multiple levels.
I remember reading about a study where they incubated corn snake eggs at different temperatures. And the results were amazing. The patterns were so different. It was like they belonged to entirely different species.
That's a classic example. It really highlights how powerful the environment can be in shaping development, even in subtle ways.
This whole conversation has really changed how I see corn snakes. It's not just about their beauty anymore. It's about understanding the intricate processes that have shaped their evolution over millions of years.
And it's a reminder that there's always more to discover about the natural world. There's a whole world of wonder hidden within these seemingly simple patterns, just waiting to be explored.
Speaking of exploration, let's talk about the research itself. What were some of the key findings or takeaways that really stood out to you?
One of the things that really fascinated me was the level of detail and precision involved in neural crest cell migration. It's not just a random scattering of cells, it's a highly orchestrated process guided by this complex interplay of molecular signals and genetic cues.
It's like a perfectly choreographed cellular ballet.
Exactly. And the research really highlighted how crucial this process is, not just for the development of pigment cells, but also for other important structures like the nervous system.
Right. We talked about how some neural crest cells take that ventromedial pathway and contribute to the formation of the nervous system. It's mind-blowing to think about how much is riding on the journey of these tiny cells.
It really is. And the study didn't just focus on those neural crest cells in isolation. It explored how they interact with those signaling pathways, the genes, and the environment to create this incredible complexity.
It's like we've been zooming in and out of a map of corn snake development, first focusing on the individual cells and then pulling back to see how they fit into the bigger picture.
And that interconnectedness is what makes biology so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing facts, it's about understanding those relationships, the interactions, the web of life.
I have to admit, I'm a little overwhelmed by all this information, but in a good way. It's like my brain is doing a happy dance, trying to process all these new connections.
It's a lot to take in for sure, but that's the beauty of a deep dive, right? We're going beyond the surface and really exploring the intricacies of this topic.
Well, I'm definitely hooked. What's next on our journey of corn snake discovery?
Let's dive into the world of corn snake genetics and explore how those subtle variations in their DNA give rise to the incredible diversity of morphs we see today.
Sounds like a plan. Get ready, everyone, because we're about to unravel the genetic tapestry that makes each corn snake a unique masterpiece.
It's a journey that will take us from the basic building blocks of DNA to the complex interplay of genes and mutations, revealing the secrets behind those stunning colors and patterns.
Buckle up. We're entering the fascinating realm of corn snake genetics.
But trust me, you won't want to miss this.
Okay, so we've talked about those amazing neural crest cells, their epic migrations, and how the environment can even influence their artistic journey. But now let's crack the code and dive deep into the world of cornsnake genetics.
It's like we've been admiring this incredible painting from afar, and now we're getting up close and personal, examining the brushstrokes, the pigments that make it so unique.
I'm ready for my close-up. So let's talk genes. What exactly are they, and how do they play a role in creating those stunning cornsnake morphs?
Think of each gene as a separate instruction in the manual for building a corn snake. Those instructions dictate everything from their scales to their eye color, and of course those amazing color patterns we've been discussing.
So each gene is like a blueprint for a specific trait, but how do those blueprints translate into those vibrant colors and patterns we see?
Imagine you have a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, right? But what if you swapped out the chocolate chips for M&Ms? You'd still have cookies, but they would look and taste different, right? Genes are similar. They can have slightly different versions, kind of like those recipe variations, and those variations can lead to all sorts of interesting outcomes.
So you're saying that those variations are what we call mutations.
Exactly. Mutations are changes in the DNA sequence of a gene. They can be small, like swapping out a single letter in those instructions, or larger, involving whole paragraphs.
And these mutations are what give us the amazing diversity of cornsnake morphs. It's like nature is constantly experimenting with new color combinations.
It really is. Mutations can affect how much pigment is produced, where it's distributed, even the type of pigment produced by those neural crest cells we talked about.
So it's like a genetic artist's palette with mutations adding new shades and hues.
I like that. A genetic artist palette. And the fascinating thing is we can actually trace these mutations back to specific genes. It's like having a key that unlocks the secrets behind each unique morph.
That's so cool. So can you give us some examples of genes that play a big role in this cornsnake color show?
Absolutely. Remember that melanocortin-1 receptor gene, or MC1R, one involved in melanin production? Well, mutations in MC1R can result in corn snakes with reduced black pigment, like those stunning hypomelanistic morphs. It's as if someone turned down the volume on melanin production.
So one single gene can cause that dramatic shift in coloration. That's incredible. What other genes are involved?
Well, there's the oculocutaneous albinism II gene, or OCA2 mutations. In this gene, disrupt melanin production entirely, leading to albinism. Those corn snakes we talk about with the striking orange or yellow coloration, that's OCA2 in action. It's like the melanin faucet has been turned off completely.
Yeah, it's like switching out the entire paint set. Are there any other big players in this genetic symphony?
Oh yeah, there are a bunch. There's the tyrosinase-related protein 1 gene, or TYRP1, which is also involved in melanin production. But this one's a bit of a multitasker. It helps to create both black and brown pigments. So mutations in TYRP1 can lead to an even wider range of color variations.
So TYRP1 is like the conductor of the orchestra, making sure all the melanin instruments are in harmony.
Exactly. And then the sloop carrier family 2, member 9 gene, or SLC2A9, which is all about transporting and processing melanin. Remember that lavender morph with that unique purple-gray color? That's SLC2A9 at work. It's like the melanin is being filtered through a special lens, creating that one-of-a-kind coloration.
It's amazing how these genes are like building blocks of cornsnake diversity, each one contributing a unique element to the overall picture. But it's not just individual genes working in isolation, right? Don't they interact with each other too?
You're absolutely right. The genetic story of cornsnake morphs is like a complex puzzle with multiple pieces fitting together. Genes can work together to enhance, suppress, or even modify each other's effects.
So it's not just about identifying the genes, it's about understanding how they work together as a team.
Exactly. It's like a genetic orchestra with each instrument playing its part to create the final symphony.
I love that analogy. So by studying these genes, we can not only appreciate the natural beauty of corn snakes, but we could also potentially create new and even more spectacular morphs in the future.
Exactly. The field of cornsnake genetics is constantly evolving, and with every new discovery, we get closer to understanding the full potential of cornsnake diversity.
It's like peeling back the layers of a genetic onion, revealing more complexity and beauty with every layer. And the best part is, we're just getting started. Who knows what incredible discoveries lie ahead?
It really is an exciting time to be a cornsnake enthusiast. For anyone listening who wants to delve deeper, I highly recommend checking out that research paper by Brian Lobsher, who just scratched the surface, but that paper is a treasure trove of information.
It feels like we've gone on this incredible journey, from those tiny migrating cells to this intricate world of genes and mutations. And it all started with a simple question. How do corn snakes get their colors?
And the answer, as we've learned, is a symphony of biology. It's about cells and genes and the environment all working together.
A symphony that's still being written. It makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden within those scales.
Well, that's the beauty of science, right? There's always more to discover. So the next time you see a corn snake, take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance of biology that created its unique beauty. It's a story billions of years in the making, and it's still unfolding right before our eyes.
It's a reminder that there's so much wonder in the world if you just take the time to look for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but don't worry, the exploration doesn't end here. Keep those questions coming. Keep learning and keep marveling at the wonders of the natural world.
And until next time, happy herping, everyone.